Hey there. Before we get to the episode, I have a quick question for you. Have you been unsuccessfully trying to shake that feeling that you're forgetting something when it comes to your wedding? You've got the Knot app and you've downloaded countless other planning checklists, but you just can't get rid of that sneaking suspicion that there's something you don't know yet. It's a very common feeling when it comes to wedding planning. So much so that I decided to put together a free resource to help get rid of what I call FOWO, the fear of wedding oversight. Yes, it does include that 12-month task checklist, but that's just the start. In addition to the ultimate wedding planning checklist, my new Don't Forget list also includes a wedding vendor checklist, your shopping list, a packing list for the wedding weekend, and a complete wedding item setup list to make sure that you are truly not forgetting anything when it comes to your wedding. And you heard me right, this list is free for you to grab right now. Just head over to planningcollective.com/forgetting and it's all yours. That's planningcollective.com/FORGETTING and let's get rid of that FOWO together. All right, let's get on to the episode. Hi there, I'm Kate McClellan, and I've been a professional wedding planner for over 20 years now. I started Planning Collective when I noticed that though most couples are super excited about getting engaged, they quickly feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the actual process of planning their weddings. If left unchecked, this can lead to massive burnout and the urge to scrap all your plans and just elope. While this is totally normal, you don't have to sacrifice your sanity for your dream wedding. In the Wedding Planning Collective podcast, I'm going to share the processes, tips, and tools that all engaged couples like you need to feel confident, supported, and excited about your wedding plans again. Let's get started. Hey guys, Kate here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wedding Planning Collective podcast. The new year is just over 3 weeks away somehow, and that means that there are a lot of you out there with new engagement rings wondering what the best way is to actually start planning your wedding. How do you turn those Pinterest boards into reality, and what do you need to know to make sure that you're actually doing this right? The Knot and Zola apps and other planning checklists, including the ones that I have put together, they're wonderful resources. But did you know that there are some significant steps that are really crucial to wedding planning that are rarely mentioned in these lists? There are so many things to do, but these checklists don't explain the why and the how behind them. And that makes it hard to figure out what you should actually be doing next and what is going to pertain to you specifically as a couple versus just a generic checklist. So, for the next 5 episodes, I'm going to walk you through the exact steps that you need to take to set yourselves up for wedding success. And to do that, I'm going to give you a preview of the first module of my wedding planning blueprint course that is a part of the Planning Collective membership. It's actually the backbone of the Planning Collective membership, and it's how you get your foundation of wedding planning set. Today, we're going to talk about some of the common and expensive wedding planning mistakes that a lot of couples make, the planning accounts that you need before you actually start the planning process, and then we're going to go over what I mean by your wedding planning foundation. Before we get started, if you're listening to this podcast, make sure you're signed up for the Wedding Planning Blueprint Preview so you can get immediate access to these episodes as well as the workbook that will help you get started. You can sign up for free at planningcollective.com/blueprint. Let's start by going over the most common wedding planning mistakes that I see a lot of couples make. The first is booking your venue before solidifying your budget. Number 2 is thinking an at-home or backyard wedding will save you money. Number 3 is hiring family and friends instead of professionals. And number 4 is not having a miscellaneous category in your budget. Mistake number 1, booking your venue before you solidify your budget. Wedding planning lists will commonly start with book your wedding venue or venues. And while your venue is the first thing that you're going to be booking, it's definitely not the first planning task that you should be doing. If I could talk to couples right after they're engaged, I would make sure that they have that dreaded budget discussion before even looking at any venues or other vendors online. Your reception will be between 40 and 50% of your overall budget. until you sit down and work through your budget, not just briefly discussing a general number. It's almost impossible to know what that dollar amount associated with that 40 to 50% is going to be. If you commit to or fall in love with a venue or catering company that will take up a significantly higher portion or percentage of that budget, you'll be forced to make tough cuts in other areas, or more than likely, you're going to end up being over budget from the very beginning of planning. In episode 100 of the Wedding Planning Collective podcast, I share the story of Paige and Craig's wedding planning journey. To summarize quickly here, they thought they had found the perfect venue that was within their budget, according to the breakdown from the Knot app that they had used. They locked it in, and they were then surprised to learn that not only were there some common surprise fees that they had overlooked, but their initial budget had missed some pretty important details. Contracts were already signed at this point, deposits were made, and so they had to make it work. In the end, they had to sacrifice some things for their wedding that they wouldn't have had to with a different venue. They really wanted a live band and loads of florals for their ceremony, and unfortunately, they just weren't able to do that. Now, was it still a beautiful wedding? Of course. But would they have done things differently had they really known what they were looking for from the beginning, or if they had known what to ask the venue from the beginning? Absolutely. And this is what we're doing this series for. These are the things that we're going to catch before you lock anything in. So as you're going through the planning process, you know that you haven't made these mistakes right from the beginning. We're going to dig further into the budget in the third episode of this series. So make sure that you come back for that. Or again, you can head over to planningcollective.com/blueprint now and sign up for the full series. Okay, mistake number 2 is thinking that an at home or backyard wedding will save you money. Now, to be clear, you can put on a very simple and cheap backyard wedding. It's definitely possible, but it's often a lot more expensive and a lot more work than most couples think from the beginning of planning. And that's usually because most couples still want to have the structure or formality of a traditional wedding, even if you are opting to host it at home. And that's where the prices start to add up. If you are thinking of having an at home wedding, you'll probably need to supply the following rental items, and that would be a tent, tables, chairs for both the ceremony and the reception, dance floor, linens like your tablecloths and napkins, drapery, furniture, china, barware, flatware, glassware, all of those details. And in addition to that, you need to arrange for other services like catering, the wait staff, bartenders. You might need a portable restroom, someone to help you with the setup and tear down. And most couples will also want to add in housekeeping and lawn service just to take the pressure off a little bit the week of the wedding. So, those are some of the things that if you're in a traditional venue, they're all taken care of for you. If you're at home, you are now responsible to do all of those details. So before you decide on having an at home wedding or a backyard wedding, make sure you take some time to add up the estimates for these details and compare it to some of your top venues that you might go to. And if you're thinking about having a backyard wedding, I have a very detailed guide just for you. And I'm going to include that in our wedding planning blueprint preview. So again, if you're signed up, you can find that linked here. If you're not, make sure you sign up for the free series to get your hands on that guide. Mistake number 3 is hiring family and friends instead of professionals. Now, this one might seem obvious, but you would be surprised how many times I hear my aunt is making our cake, or I have a college friend that wants to be a wedding photographer, so they're going to do our photos for free. And while the idea of saving money on all these vendors can really be appealing, I get it. It often results in added expenses and or last minute scrambling to hire somebody else if they back out or something happens. To really hit this point home, I wanted to share some real wedding scenarios that have cost my clients loads of money and time in the end. First, the friend of a family had a catering company that bailed after they had booked their venue. And the venue was only affordable to them because they were getting such a good deal on the catering costs. Second, the bride's cousin messed up on the invitation designs and they had to rush order from a template website and pay for overnight shipping. Third, friends of the groom offered to pack and clean up at the end of the night, Instead, they got drunk, left for an after party, and the couple lost their security deposit from the venue. The mother of the bride also had to stay late and help pack up. And our last one, the mother of the bride wanted to make the desserts for the sweet station. Their oven broke a week before the wedding, and after paying for rush repair fees, they had to find a baker last minute when the oven still didn't work. Now, to be clear, if your family member or friend is a wedding or event professional, I'm not referring to them. Most people have the best of intentions, but life happens, and professionals have systems in place and equipment in place to handle these kinds of things that might pop up. Mistake number 4 is not having a miscellaneous category in your budget. And it doesn't matter how detailed your initial budget is, you are always going to have surprise costs along the way. We can't predict what they might be. It really depends on what type of venue you have and all of the other logistics. But these surprise costs often pop up in the weeks or month before the wedding. If your wedding will be at a traditional venue with minimal outside details or vendors, I suggest you put about 5% of the budget aside for these miscellaneous costs. If you're at a unique venue or a tented reception, I recommend going closer to 10% for this miscellaneous fund because you're likely to have a lot more details that might be involved. And one last budget tip for you, I always recommend having $200 to $500 in cash on hand the day of the wedding. This way you can be prepared if you need to purchase something last minute, have somebody run off and get something for you, or if you just want to tip an amazing staff member that really helped make the day special. Okay, now that we know you're not going to make any of these common mistakes, let's talk about the first actual action steps you should take while planning your wedding. And that is going to be setting up your wedding accounts. Once the planning gets started, you're going to be flooded with vendor emails, quotes, inspiration pics, and Excel docs. It's probably already happening. Before you get in too deep, take a few minutes to set up these free accounts to help you keep everything organized. The first is a wedding specific email address. Grab a new email address to help keep your wedding related conversations and emails separate from work or personal emails. Gmail, of course, is a favorite, and you can use your date or your names to come up with an easy to remember address. Number 2 is Google Drive. If you aren't already using Google Drive, you're definitely going to want to get familiar with it right now. I recommend this over Word and Excel because you can share certain documents with your fiance, your family, and your wedding party members. And that can come in handy when it comes to collecting addresses, working on the budget, or sharing timeline or other details with your wedding party. It will also be an easy way for you to keep your vendor contacts and details all organized and accessible wherever you are. Number 3, Pinterest. And chances are you probably already have a Pinterest board or two started for your wedding. But if not, now is definitely the time. I know it's easy to have a love-hate relationship with Pinterest. While it is very helpful to find inspiration and some ideas for your wedding, it can feel like a dark hole sometimes where you just lose a whole afternoon while you're on Pinterest. But it really does help with communicating your exact preferences with the vendors, especially when we get into the design components of the wedding. And the fourth category for accounts will be with a wedding planning app like Zola, WeddingWire, and The Knot. As I mentioned in the beginning, these apps are great resources for you while you're planning your wedding. Of course, they do come with their limitations, which we're going to cover a little bit throughout this series. Zola is currently my favorite for the majority of the features that they offer, but I find that the vendor listings and reviews are better on WeddingWire and The Knot. And pair any of these apps with the Planning Collective membership, of course, and you'll have everything that you need to plan the perfect wedding. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to do a quick preview of what's to come in the next 4 episodes, where I'm going to discuss how you build your wedding planning foundation. Let's pretend for a minute that planning a wedding follows the same steps as building a house. Once you have your plans or blueprints in place, the next step in building is to set the foundation. Without a strong foundation for your house, the rest of the structure will be unstable and could collapse at any minute. Having a strong foundation when it comes to your wedding plans is just as important. But I find that many couples will just breeze through these initial steps because they want to get to the fun stuff of planning. However, I promise that if you spend just a bit of time in these four pillars of the foundation, you're going to be much more confident in your plans as you move forward. And when I say just a little bit of time, I'm talking like under an hour. So I'm certainly not saying put your plans off for weeks while you focus on this foundation. Just spend a little bit of time making sure that you really talk about what you want, and then you're going to feel more comfortable moving forward. The pillars that create your foundation are your wedding priorities, the budget, your guest list, and your checklist and timelines. I'm going to tackle them all in more detail in each of the next four episodes of the Planning Collective podcast. But remember, you can watch them all now in the Wedding Planning Blueprint preview series at planningcollective.com/blueprint. And now I want to hear from you. Are you recently engaged and planning your wedding? Head on over to the Wedding Planning Collective Facebook group and say hi. It's a growing community of other engaged couples looking for planning help and inspiration, and most importantly, others that want to talk weddings 24/7. If you found this episode helpful, please take a quick second to rate and review on the platform you're listening on. It would mean the world to me, and it will help other couples get the wedding planning help they need. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode where we're going to talk about wedding priorities.